You know what would really shake him up? One of them snorts, her words slurred just enough to be honest. Pretend you're going away for a conference with Brian. I guarantee Mr. Steady would finally show some fire. Laughter explodes around the table like clinking glass. My wife, the woman I bought a lake house for on our 10th anniversary, leans back and swirls her wine, pretending to blush. You think he'd actually notice? I could probably tell him I'm spending the weekend at Brian's villa, and he'd just nod and ask if I want him to drive me. More laughter. Too loud. Too smug. That long, hollow kind that's less about humor and more about cruelty in heels. I'm 15 feet away, in the kitchen, drying the cast iron pan I used to make them dinner. Tomato confit and lamb. She posted a picture of it on Instagram with the caption, "When your man's too boring to cheat but cooks like a Michelin chef," smiling face with hard eyes. It already has 47 likes. I don't slam the pan. I don't clear my throat. I just stand there, letting the dish towel soak in the heat of the iron. She knows I can hear them. That's part of the thrill. They always say they want a good man until they get one. Then they want him to dance. Or bleed. Or at least beg not to be humiliated in his own house. I put the pan on the rack and pour myself a neat bourbon. I don't speak until the room quiets slightly, that half second where laughter dies and no one's sure who's going to fill the silence. "Well, Allison," I say, eyes still on the glass in my hand. "If Brian has room in his calendar, make sure you book early. Those weekend rates sneak up on you." The air freezes. One of her friends coughs into her sleeve. Another grabs her wine glass like a shield. Allison doesn't look at me, just mutters, "It's just a joke." "Sure." I nod, sipping. So was Chernobyl. None of them laughed this time. I sit back down with my drink and let the moment stretch until the bubbles in their Prosecco seem too loud for the room. And here's where you're probably expecting the usual man tragedy routine. The poor fool who gives his all and gets walked over like a bath mat. You might even be thinking, yeah, that's me. But if you've made it this far and you're one of the 90% who haven't hit subscribe, do it. Not for me. For the team that helps me tell these stories. The ones that don't end with the guy crying into a couch pillow, but with something far colder. See, I didn't raise my voice that night. I didn't demand loyalty or respect or even honesty. I just smiled. Because that smile, that was the beginning of her test. And she wasn't ready for the grade I was about to give her. The rest of the evening played out with that performative awkwardness they always use when they know they pushed it too far, but refuse to admit it. The wine kept flowing, but the laughter didn't bounce the same way. Her friend Kim made some offhand comment about early flights and disappeared before dessert. Dana suddenly remembered her kid had a science fair. The third one, Jess, lingered just long enough to offer Allison a "you okay?" That was more habit than concern. Allison came to bed an hour after I did. She smelled like eucalyptus body lotion and sour wine. Climbed into the sheets like everything was normal. She didn't say goodnight. Neither did I. She assumed I was sulking. Or worse, oblivious. But I already had a plan. And I knew how long it needed to bake. Not like the souffle she never notices. This was something deeper. Hotter. And this time, it wouldn't fall. The next morning, Allison was humming. Actually humming. Not the forced, high-pitched, good mood act she sometimes pulled after snapping at a waiter, but the real kind. Tuned to a song only she could hear, the melody of someone getting away with something. She packed like she was going on a honeymoon. It was a conference, of course. She had mentioned it weeks ago in passing. "Brian will be there," she said, feigning neutrality while watching me from the side of her mascara wand. "I'll need to be sharp. The investors from Denver are attending too." Like that explained the new bikini still tagged on the bed. I stood in the doorway with a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone charger in the other. "Don't forget this," I said, laying the cord gently beside her suitcase. She gave me a quick smile. Almost grateful. Almost guilty. "Thanks. You always think of everything." That line. That smug, velvet-coated jab. Translation. "Thanks for playing your role while I rewrite the script." I just nodded and sipped. "You'll need the charger. Long flights, hotel Wi-Fi, business texts, you know." Her hands paused for a second at the word hotel, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, it's just one night in Chicago. In and out. I'll be back Sunday." "You're always in and out," I said. She froze this time, then forced a laugh. "You sound jealous." "No," I said, meeting her eyes for the first time that morning. "Jealousy requires uncertainty." She looked down at her bag, then up at the mirror, adjusted her necklace like that would fix the color that had drained slightly from her face. "Well, if you're going to be cryptic about it." I stepped into the room and placed her travel thermos next to her purse. Black coffee. No sugar. She liked pretending she was the kind of woman who took it bitter. Car's picking you up at 2:15. I booked it already. Same driver as last time. She blinked. Oh, thanks. No problem, I said, walking out. I like predictable things. At 2:11, the black sedan pulled into the driveway. I helped load her suitcase. Kissed her cheek. She pulled back faster than usual, maybe not wanting to smell like me. Or maybe just afraid I'd whisper something into her ear she couldn't unhear. You okay? She asked, smoothing her skirt. Her phone buzzed. Probably Brian. Better than I've been in years. She narrowed her eyes, trying to decode that, then nodded to herself like she'd solved the riddle. You'll see. This little trip might wake you up a bit. I tilted my head, genuinely curious. To what? You know, she said, climbing into the car, flashing one final, breathless grin. What you're missing. The door shut. The car drove off. She never saw me raise an eyebrow in the window's reflection. Not sarcastic. Not angry. Just mildly intrigued. Like a professor grading a student's thesis that he already knows is plagiarized. She thought I was too passive to respond. That I'd stew quietly for a weekend, maybe get drunk and mope in the guest room. That I'd wait for her to come home smelling like hotel linens and excuses, and swallow it like all the other disrespect served lukewarm over the years. But I wasn't angry. Anger fades. No, this was something else entirely. It was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity that hums like piano wire before it snaps. I poured myself another bourbon, sat in her empty chair, scrolled through her text messages on the iPad she never remembered synced to mine, deleted nothing, took screenshots of everything, printed 3, and then I opened the drawer next to the sink. Inside, buried under unused chargers and receipts from restaurants we never enjoyed, was a small leather case. Dusty, zipper frayed. I opened it. Inside was the one business card I swore I'd never use again. White. Plain. No logo. Just a name. Gerard Ellison. Airport Security Compliance. I smiled. She wanted a trip? I'd give her one. Just not the return ticket. I waited until the bourbon glass sweat into a ring on the table before I touched the card. One number. No extensions. No online footprint. Gerard was the kind of man who didn't exist unless you needed him to. The kind who operated in places without security cameras and knew exactly which badge scanners had manual overrides. It had been nearly 14 years since I called him last. That time it was for my brother. A matter of custody, a small private runway in Vermont, and a pilot who owed me one too many poker debts. This wasn't that. This was something sharper. I picked up the kitchen landline. Not my cell. Too traceable. Allison mocked me for still paying for it. Who even has a landline anymore, she'd say. Men who plan in silence, Allison. Men who don't leave fingerprints. I dialed. It rang once. Then silence. Then the familiar click of a receiver being lifted but not spoken into. Just breathing. Gerard's way of confirming it was me. Gerard, I said softly, like we were in church. It's Tom. I need a quiet favor. Nothing illegal. Just administrative. Another pause. Then his voice. Rusted smooth. You always call after she leaves, huh? I didn't laugh. You still have pull at Logan? Terminal C, he replied. Domestic. What's the date? Today. Passenger named Allison Bishop. She's flying with a Brian Carter, her boss. First class tickets. Chicago. Got it. What's the favor? I reached into the manila envelope I'd prepped last night. It contained 3 documents, a notarized statement, a sealed envelope marked confidential, final destination, and one photo, time-stamped, showing Brian with his hand resting a little too familiarly on Allison's lower back during a team dinner last quarter. Candlelit. 2 plates. No third chair. I'm sending a PDF to your encrypted box. Same alias as last time. Still exists. I'll pull it in 5. Make sure her gate changes after TSA, I said. Make sure she's flagged. Not detained. Just redirected. And that she receives the envelope. Privately. With a witness. Done. Also, I added, tightening the grip on the phone. Make sure Brian Carter gets his own special note. This should include the flight itinerary to internal affairs. Gerard exhaled through his teeth. You're playing for keeps this time. She asked for a test, I said. I'm just grading it. He chuckled once dry. You always were surgical, Tom. Just bored of being predictable. I heard him type in the background, the soft mechanical clack of someone used to physical keyboards, someone old enough to know how to erase footprints. Okay, he said after a moment. Gate F9. You'll want to be by your phone at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. That's when she hands over the passport. I'll be waiting. And Tom, yeah. Don't call again unless it's for something worse. I like you better when you're calm. I didn't respond. Just hung up. I walked to the garage. pulled a small lockbox from the workbench. Inside was everything I'd been collecting for 5 months. Not because I planned this, but because somewhere, deep down, I knew I'd need it someday. Emails, printouts, GPS data from her iPad backups, 2 dry cleaning receipts from a boutique near Brian's condo, and 1 signed document she forgot about entirely. A prenuptial amendment tied to conduct and public reputation, co-signed by her father after a Christmas party incident she barely remembered. Back then, she begged me to not make a scene and promised to be better. Back then, I believed her. But now I was done with belief. It was time for precision. Time for proof. I slid everything into a fireproof courier envelope, labeled it with the exact instructions Gerard would need. Then I sat back in the armchair by the bay window. Sunlight dipped behind the tree lean like it had somewhere better to be. I watched the road and waited for the sound of a plane taking off. Allison wore her "I'm a boss" sunglasses indoors, the oversized ones with the gold tips that made her look like a cross between a trophy wife and an HR complaint waiting to happen. Brian, of course, loved them. He kept adjusting his cufflinks and leaning in too close when he laughed, like this was already a victory lap. They strolled through TSA like they were walking a red carpet. Allison even winked at the woman checking her ID. "Work trip," she whispered, just loud enough for people nearby to hear. "But with benefits." Brian grinned like a teenager who just shoplifted something expensive and got away with it. They found their gate early, sat side by side in first-class seats near the window, chatting about how stupid HR was and how Allison would handle the investor call better than Brian anyway. The flirtation wasn't even subtle anymore. She crossed her legs toward him. He let his fingers brush the back of her arm when handing her the boarding pass. She took a selfie, posted it to her private story with the caption, "Test in progress." Face with tears of joy airplane kiss mark. The laughing emoji. The kiss emoji. The little symbols of casual betrayal. What a joke it all was. Gate agent number 4 was a woman named Camille, late 30s, precise in posture. She had been briefed, quietly, by Gerard an hour before. She wasn't told much, just that this woman's boarding documents were under review. Camille didn't ask for details. She wasn't paid to ask. When Allison walked up and handed over her passport and boarding pass with a bright, fake smile, Camille ran the scan, then frowned, ran it again. Her forehead creased. "Just a moment, ma'am," she said, standing up. Brian looked up from his phone, where he was mid-text to someone labeled BT, "After dinner?" Allison tilted her head. "Something wrong?" Camille didn't answer. She was already walking to the service phone mounted on the wall near the gate bridge. A man in a navy vest appeared a minute later. Older, polished, airport operations badge clipped to his belt. He walked over with a folder under one arm. Not rushed, almost ceremonious. "Mrs. Bishop," he said, voice low, calm, and professional. Allison stood. "Yes. May we speak with you in private for a moment?" Brian stepped in. "She's with me. We're traveling together." The man didn't even glance at him. "Just her. Please." Allison hesitated, laughed nervously. "Is this, like, a random check or something?" "No, ma'am," he said, opening the folder. "There's a note here. From your husband." She blinked. "My husband?" The man nodded. "He submitted documentation this morning. It includes sealed instructions under your name, notarized. He also submitted a revised destination request." Her voice dropped a pitch. "Revised what?" "Your flight's been updated. As of 9:17 a.m., he said, showing her the stamped paper. "By legal proxy. You'll be rerouted." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "What does that even mean?" Brian barked. "You can't just change someone's flight." "We can," the man said evenly. "When the ticket was purchased under a joint marital account and accompanied by a sealed modification request processed through Executive Travel Authority." Allison suddenly looked pale. Brian grabbed her arm. "What the hell is going on?" I don't know," she whispered. The man gestured calmly. "If you'll follow me, Mrs. Bishop, we'll explain everything in the private service lounge. There's an envelope waiting there for you." Allison's legs moved before her brain caught up. She followed the man, eyes wide, hands twitching. Brian started to follow, but another agent stepped in front of him. "Sir, you'll need to remain at the gate. You're being rerouted as well, per an internal compliance alert." "Compliance? I'm not under any," he started, then stopped as another uniformed man approached. This one had a small tablet in his hand, already displaying a photo of Brian from a security camera 2 days ago. The caption read, "Do not board. Interview scheduled. Internal affairs." Brian's face drained of all color. Allison, now seated in the service lounge, stared at the white envelope on the glass table in front of her. It was thick. Her name was written in my handwriting. She reached for it with a shaking hand, then paused. The man in the vest sat across from her, opened his own copy of the file, and said quietly, "Your husband asked us to deliver this personally." She finally opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 12 lines of text, perfectly centered, and one photograph, taken from a hotel security feed. Her, Brian. 2 weeks ago. She dropped it on the table. The man didn't speak. He just waited for her to break first. And outside, 2 boarding passes were quietly voided. One journey had ended. Another had just begun. The room wasn't an interrogation chamber. No mirrored glass. No glaring bulbs. Just a soft beige lounge. The kind they use for VIPs who missed a flight or celebrities waiting to board in private. Comfortable enough to dull suspicion, sterile enough to sting. Allison walked in like a sleepwalker, her heels too loud against the linoleum. The door shut behind her with a click that sounded more like a lock than she wanted to admit. She was alone, or so she thought. Her suitcase was already there, placed neatly in the center of the room. Unzipped. Open. Her clothes refold, not rifled through. Someone had been thorough, but meticulous. Atop her silk blouse sat a thick folder, black, with silver lettering embossed into the cover. "For you." Her fingers hovered over it like it might explode. She opened it. The first page was a photo. Hotel security footage, time-stamped. Brian's hand low on her back. Her head tilted just slightly. The two of them entering a suite. The timestamp matched the night she told me she was working late. Client dinner ran long. The second photo, her curled against Brian in a booth at the airport bar 2 months prior. A drink in her hand. His mouth too close to her ear. Her phone turned screen down on the table, facing him. Page 3 wasn't a photo. It was a printed-out email. The subject line read, "I can't wait for this weekend. Winky face." The sender, Allison.Bishop@hercompany.com. The recipient, Carter@corpstrategics.net. Date, 2 days ago. There were 5 more emails. She thought she had deleted them. She had, but I hadn't. Behind the emails were logs, printouts of metadata, IP addresses, timestamps from her office computer and hotel Wi-Fi. Someone had gone deep. Not just digging, but exhuming. And then, finally, one page. Centered. Typed in large, crisp font. "You wanted a test. This is the result. Your score has been recorded. There will be no retakes." She stared at the sentence like it might rearrange itself. Her throat was suddenly dry. She looked around the room again, as if it had shrunk. A knock. The door opened. A different man entered this time, bald, holding a tablet, expression unreadable. "Ma'am," he said, "I need to ask you to remain here a bit longer. There's been a development with your travel companion." Her voice cracked. "Brian." He nodded. "He's being interviewed by internal compliance regarding a flagged corporate expense report. There were irregularities connected to your name." "My name?" she said, standing quickly. "I didn't file anything." He held up the tablet. "Your signature's on it. Digitally at least. Dated last quarter." Allison felt the air pull out of her lungs like a vacuum had turned on. The man stepped forward slightly. "We're not law enforcement, Mrs. Bishop, but the people reviewing the file are. You're not detained, but you are advised not to leave." "Is he being arrested?" she asked. The man didn't answer. He simply left. Outside, in the corridor, Brian sat between 2 security officers. One had a clipboard. The other had a list. Brian wasn't laughing anymore. His blazer was unbuttoned. His jaw clenched so tight it looked wired shut. He glanced up as Allison stepped out. She started toward him. One of the officers raised a hand. "Please return to the room, ma'am." Brian didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. He planned this. Back inside, the envelope lay open on the table. The photos, the emails, the silent evidence of what she thought she'd buried. And suddenly, she saw the shape of the real test. It wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't even about the affair. It was about calculation, patience, strategy. A man like Tom didn't slam doors or scream in the driveway. He let you walk into the airport smiling, then changed the destination. By the time Allison stepped off the return flight, alone, jittery, and 2 shades paler than when she left, her phone had already detonated. First came the string of unread messages from Brian. "Call me. They froze my badge. Something's wrong. Where are you?" Then the notifications from the office Slack, buried under 30 at Allison.Bishop, pings, most unreadable except for one that stood out. "Urgent HR update. All credentials for Brian Carter have been disabled. Access suspended pending review." Her fingers trembled on the screen. She dialed Brian. Straight to voicemail. She tried Laura in HR. No answer. She tried the general office line. An automated message. We are currently undergoing security system updates. Please contact your department head for access information. She sat in her car, parked just outside their midtown building, and stared up at the mirrored glass like it had personally betrayed her. Then she noticed something new. Brian's reserved parking spot. Empty. Not just empty, scrubbed. His nameplate was gone. She left the car running and walked up to the glass doors, heels echoing like gunshots. Swiped her badge. Red. She tried again. Still red. Can I help you, ma'am? Asked the security guard she vaguely recognized, but had never bothered to learn the name of. I work here, she said. Marketing director. My badge. Your name? He asked flatly. Allison Bishop. He typed. Read something. Then said, without looking up, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. She blinked. What? You're not cleared for re-entry. She laughed, high and brittle. There must be some mistake. Ma'am. He interrupted, a touch firmer this time. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Now. She stood there, stunned, as the glass door slowly slid shut behind her like a guillotine made of silence. Her phone buzzed again. A new email, subject line. Internal governance action, immediate personnel changes. She opened it, hand shaking. Effective immediately, Brian Carter is placed on administrative suspension pending a formal inquiry into alleged misuse of company funds and breach of professional conduct. This decision is supported by oversight from Executive Board Liaison Group and the firm's silent investor partners. At the bottom, Emergency Board Meeting, 3 p.m., Agenda, Financial Exposure, Personnel Integrity. She reread the phrase, silent investor partners, 3 times. The words twisted in her gut like a cold screw. She opened her personal Gmail, something she rarely used for work, scanned through weeks-old notifications she'd ignored, then found it. A forwarded LinkedIn update. Tom had been added to the board of a holdings company, Harrow Bridge Capital. She clicked on the company. They were listed as a quiet fund with indirect holdings in 9 major firms, including hers, including Brian's. And right there, buried in the archived newsletter from 2 years ago, a single sentence lit up like a fuse. Harrow Bridge's controlling vote in Tier 1 marketing has historically never been exercised. Until now. Allison suddenly understood why Tom never argued. Why he never slammed doors or made threats. Why he always knew which contracts she'd signed without reading the fine print. Because he'd written them. She called Brian again. Voicemail. Tried the assistant. She picked up. He's not taking calls, she said quietly. Legal is in his office. Legal. Allison's voice cracked. They pulled the audits. There's a file. With your name on half the approvals. But I never. Your initials are on them. Click. Allison stood on the sidewalk, still holding her useless ID badge, staring up at the building where she'd built 10 years of manufactured importance. The place where she'd climbed over kinder people to sit beside a man she now couldn't even reach on the phone. Above her, behind those mirrored panes, a meeting was starting. And one chair, Tom's, was no longer empty. The group chat, Girls Who Win, used to ping nonstop. Memes, wine selfies, complaints about husbands who just don't get it, and endless screenshots of messages from flirty coworkers. For years, it was their little echo chamber of smug entitlement. Now, nothing. Allison sat cross-legged on the edge of her guest bed, the only room left untouched by what she now thought of as the collapse. The silence was louder than ever. She refreshed the chat. Last seen, yesterday. Still nothing. So she messaged them directly. To Kim, hey, everything okay? Can we talk? Delivered. No reply. To Dana, I really need a friend right now. Read. Then the 3 dots appeared and vanished. 5 minutes later. I think it's best we don't talk for a while. To Jess, the one who had always been the wild card, the one who dared her that night. You started this. You told me to test him. Why are you ghosting me now? The message didn't go through. Blocked. Allison dropped the phone and stared at it like it had physically betrayed her. But the real blow came an hour later, when her name started trending. Trending. Not in a fun, viral TikTok way. No. Someone had leaked the screenshots. Not just the group chat messages, but Allison's own words. Her smug, tipsy line from that night at their house. He's too boring to leave, too spineless to fight. It was all there. Attached to an anonymous post on a gossip forum known for exposing corporate scandal. The headline read, Executive's wife tried to test husband with boss. Backfires spectacularly. And worse. The post included one damning quote from Jess. The third friend, who'd clearly decided it was time to burn the ship and swim. She was told to test him. She failed. He passed. The fallout is hers to carry. The comments section was a firing squad. She played a stupid game. Won a lifetime supply of consequences. Loyal husband gets humiliated, responds like a king. This is the new standard. Quiet revenge, a loud drama. Where can I find a man like Tom? It got worse by the minute. Someone had found her Instagram. Screenshots of her test in progress winking face. Story circulated fast. They'd paired it side by side with a photo of her standing outside the office, holding her badge, face frozen in disbelief. The mean captions were merciless. Day 1 of the test, feeling cute face blowing a kiss. Day 3 of the test, evicted from your own boardroom woozy face. DMs poured in. Some from strangers, some from old acquaintances who never liked her, but finally had a reason to say it. One even wrote, "He served gourmet meals while you served betrayal. Enjoy the microwave life now." She tried deleting comments, tried locking down her account, but it was too late. Screenshots were forever. Allison called Kim one last time, straight to voicemail. She sent one more group message. "You all encouraged this. You said it was harmless. Why am I the one left holding the bag?" 5 minutes later, the entire group chat disappeared, deleted by admin. She sat on the guest bed, now in a house that felt like someone else's Airbnb. Her suitcase still half open on the floor. Not unpacked, not repacked, just stuck. The same state as her life. Outside the window, the sky turned the color of dishwater. She opened her laptop. Slack access, revoked. Company email, locked. LinkedIn, flooded with vague but damning updates from coworkers. Phrases like leadership transition and lessons in discretion. She clicked on a familiar name, Brian Carter. No longer listed. The corporate world was moving on, fast and silent, like a current that had no time for drowning swimmers. And her so-called support system? They weren't throwing her a rope. They were swimming away. Allison hadn't been to her father's estate in nearly 8 months. Not since she skipped his birthday to fly to Scottsdale with the girls for a wine and wellness weekend. She'd send him a bottle of overpriced bourbon and a card signed, "Love you. Mean it." As if sentiment could be outsourced like laundry. Now, she pulled into the circular driveway in a rental SUV, her own car still registered under the company lease Tom had frozen. The house looked the same, but somehow colder. The lights were on, but none of them inviting. She climbed the steps like a child again, except this time there was no backpack, no scraped knees, just shame she couldn't hide behind a smile or stilettos. The door opened before she knocked. Her father stood in the entry, wearing the same navy sweater he wore when he didn't want to be disturbed. Behind him, nothing moved. No dog, no warmth, just the quiet hum of a house that had already decided she was an outsider. He didn't hug her, didn't say her name, just held out a sealed envelope. She took it, confused. "Dad, please, I need to explain." He didn't blink. "I don't want the explanation. I've read the emails." "What emails?" "The ones Tom forwarded me." She froze. He sent them with a simple subject line. "You should know." And he was right. I should. I had to read them twice to believe my own daughter could be that reckless. "Dad, it wasn't like that. You lied. You used your husband's money, my money, and made a fool of a man who fed you, clothed you, elevated you. A man who came to me for a loan when your spending was spiraling out of control. And do you know what he did with the money I gave him?" She shook her head, mute. "He paid off your debts." Silently. Never mentioned it again. "I didn't ask him to." "No," he said, voice sharp. "You asked him for a breathing room. You asked him for freedom. And then you flew to a hotel with your boss and posted duck-face selfies while the man holding your world together was sitting in his office planning your future. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her father laughed bitterly. "Far? This isn't far, Allison. This is final." He gestured to the envelope. "Inside is the amendment. Your trust has been revoked. The assets are being redistributed to the family foundation. You'll receive a small monthly stipend, enough to keep the lights on in a studio apartment. That's it." She opened it with trembling fingers. The paper was stamped, notarized, effective immediately. But you always said that trust was conditional, based on the assumption that you'd show some damn character. You embarrassed the wrong man, Allison." She swallowed, eyes watering. "So what now? You're cutting me off." "I'm giving you what you earned," he said coldly. "A clean break. Use it." She stared at him, stunned. "You don't mean this. You're just upset. I can fix it. I'll apologize, publicly. I'll talk to Tom." "Tom," he cut in, "hasn't said a single unkind word about you. Not once. Not to me. Not to anyone. That made it worse. So much worse. He didn't need to, her father added. He just showed us who you really are. And that was enough. Silence. Then, now please leave my property before I have someone escort you. Her heart dropped like an anchor. You're serious? She whispered. As a ledger. She took one step back. Then another. The door closed before she reached her car. She sat in the driver's seat with the envelope on her lap, the ink still warm. Her phone vibrated. 2 unread messages. One from her bank. Account access limited. Please contact administrator. One from the landlord of the downtown condo. Your lease was under Mr. Bishop's corporate guarantee. With that terminated, we'll need a new guarantor by Monday or begin eviction proceedings. The screen dimmed, and in the reflection, she didn't see a confident woman or a wronged wife. She saw a woman completely, methodically, and permanently erased. The email came at 4:02 a.m., the kind of time when nothing good arrives. Allison hadn't slept anyway. The guest room mattress felt like burlap, and the ticking from the old wall clock she hadn't replaced since college sounded like a metronome counting down the final beats of her old life. She rolled over, checked her phone out of habit, and there it was. Subject: Asset Reassessment, Marital Clause Enforcement. From Holloway and Klein LLP. To Allison Bishop. She opened it, bracing for another splash of cold water. It began like every other legal gut punch, cordial, impersonal, precise. Dear Mrs. Bishop, in accordance with the provisions outlined in the post-nuptial agreement signed on August 14, 2015, and in conjunction with discretionary provisions included in Clause 14b, specifically those pertaining to reputational and behavioral thresholds, we are notifying you of immediate reassessment and reallocation of marital assets. She blinked. Clause 14b. She remembered the signing day clearly now. It was after a fundraiser, Tom's idea of a celebration. A simple legal update to protect both parties. She hadn't read it. She'd been too busy showing off the diamond necklace he gave her that night. Now, that clause was a guillotine. Effective immediately, all co-owned property, including primary residence, vehicles, joint accounts, and discretionary investment portfolios, has been returned to the sole control of Mr. Thomas Bishop under advisory escrow until a final review is complete. Your personal account has been severed from the shared system and suspended pending further proceedings. She scrolled faster. Her stomach turned. It was all gone. The condo, transferred. The Audi, registered to Tom's holding company. The accounts, frozen. Even her gym membership, revoked. It had been paid through his corporate benefits. Then, at the bottom, centered. No legalese. Just a final sentence in a different font, unmistakably personal. Next time you take a trip, be sure you know the destination. She dropped the phone. Not out of shock. Out of nausea. A few hours later, the internet confirmed what she already suspected. Brian had resigned voluntarily following financial scrutiny and conduct concerns. The press release included the usual sanitized language, but buried in the third paragraph was the phrase, effective immediately. Gone. Just like that. The man she gambled her life on hadn't just folded, he'd fled. Allison tried to call him. It rang twice, then cut to a generic voicemail. No name. No greeting. Just dead air. She checked Instagram. His account was gone. Vanished like a puff of expensive cologne. Her email buzzed again. A different notification. Eviction notice. Premises at 410 East Madison. Tom's name had been on the lease. It was a corporate rental, now deactivated. She'd have 5 business days to vacate. No appeal. No grace period. She walked through the now silent condo, barefoot on cold marble, hands trailing over furniture she never cared about until she realized it no longer belonged to her. The designer mirror in the hallway, gifted by Tom's mother. The Italian lamp she hated but bragged about to her friends. The espresso machine she never learned to use. Everything screamed comfort. Everything whispered goodbye. A knock at the door startled her. It was the building manager, apologetic but firm. He handed her a thick manila envelope labeled Exit Packet. Inside, a checklist, a key return form, and a prepaid voucher for a single night at a 3-star hotel 2 blocks away. Just enough mercy to keep her from sleeping on the street. Allison looked at the packet, then at the condo she thought she'd die in, and she started laughing. Not loud, just a broken, cracked giggle that slipped out of her throat like steam from a pressure valve. This was the end of the flight, the end of the test, the flight that never took off. Not just the one to Chicago, but the whole fantasy. The upward arc, the secret escape plan, the new life with the charming boss. Gone. No boarding pass. No terminal, just a one-way descent into irrelevance. And Tom, he never even raised his voice, never made a scene. He just adjusted the altitude and let gravity handle the rest. It was a Thursday morning when the envelope arrived. No knock, no doorbell, just a dull thud on the welcome mat outside the hotel room she now called home. A beige box of a room with thin curtains and a rattling AIC unit that wheezed like a dying animal. No one at the front desk claimed to see who dropped it off. No camera caught the delivery. Just an unmarked manila rectangle, creased at the corners. She picked it up with the kind of dread people usually reserve for pink slips or test results. Back inside, she sat on the edge of the bed and opened it slowly. Inside, a single printed plane ticket. One way, commercial, coach, destination, a small, icy town in Maine. Population, 3,712. She hadn't been there in over a decade. The only person she knew who still lived there was her older sister, Margaret. Estranged. The fallout had been over money, or more accurately, Allison's condescending belief that Margaret had wasted her potential by becoming a schoolteacher. Margaret never responded to that email, never visited again. Allison stared at the ticket for a long time, then pulled out the second item in the envelope, a small note card, thick and textured, the kind you find in gift boxes or between the pages of expensive books. No signature, just a sentence, typed in that same cold, centered font. Some journeys don't need return flights. Bon voyage. Her hand trembled, not with rage, not even sadness, just the hollow, echoing weight of finality. She set the ticket down on the bed beside her and stared at the faded wallpaper. A fly buzzed against the window pane. Trapped, bouncing from edge to edge, unable to see the exit right in front of it. She didn't cry. That had stopped a week ago, somewhere between the storage unit key mix-up and the moment she realized her credit cards had quietly expired, replaced months ago under Tom's name. She was too tired for tears now, too empty. Her phone buzzed. A notification. It was from Tom. She hadn't seen that name in weeks. Not a message, just a status update. Married 18 years. Tested once. Never again. She stared at the screen. No photo. No tagged friends. Just the text. Cold. Dignified. Unmovable. The comment section was already filling up. Congrats from old colleagues. Subtle nods from family friends. Even a few of her old acquaintances, now switching allegiances like rats from a burning ship. One wrote, legendary restraint. No screaming. Just execution. Another, she tested a king and got checkmated. Allison turned the phone face down. The room was silent again, save for the AC huffing in protest against the mid-autumn chill. On the nightstand, the envelope lay open, the ticket half-folded. No court battle. No police reports. No screaming matches in lawyers' offices or desperate voicemails begging for another chance. Tom had chosen exile. Clean. Quiet. Unforgiving. He didn't want revenge. He wanted peace. And he'd bought it in full. With a single, unreturnable gift. The journey was over. And the destination? Permanent.